So as we go into our fourth function, we're going to do a little housekeeping in the code first. And this housekeeping can be important just to keep your code looking good and easy to read. So as I flip over, the first thing I want you to notice is that I cleaned up some of the code, added some extra comments. But in that process, I've added some comments like this line that you can't see all of. Notice that it kind of scrolled over, that way you could see the entire line. It's not great to force people to always be scrolling across. I also don't want myself to be projected over some code that you guys need to read. So what I'm going to do is actually make it so it's a little bit shorter of a line. This really just makes it more friendly for you or other people to read in the future. So in this case with the comment, all I need to do is hit enter at the end of the comment line and put that apostrophe back to reinitiate that comment. Now we have two comments. It's just a continuation of the line before. However, that doesn't really work for this line that already has code in it. So if this line of code in it, if I actually hit enter here and break it up, I get this compile error, right? It expects an identifier. Basically, it's telling me I broke the line somehow. And that's because, there's a comma with nothing else after that. So if I say OK, I'm going to use a very important keystroke here, which is just the simple underscore. All right, so that's the underscore key. And what that does is it tells Excel, or VBA rather, to keep reading the line of code on the next line. So it interprets this entire statement as all one line of code because of that little underscore at the end. So that fixed the problem. Excel is no longer worried about that anymore. And now I'm no longer superimposed over the text. So it's a little bit cleaner, easier to read. So now what I'm going to do is let's start that fourth function. So let's go ahead and copy this. I'm going to scroll down so we have a little bit more room to work with. Notice how I can't scroll down right now. If that bothers you, one thing you can do is just hit enter a bunch of times, create some blank lines of code before, and now we have a little bit more room to work. All right, first thing we do again, we got to change the name because we can't name things the same way. And we also got to change our value down here, right? Because again, the function name has to match whatever that variable is that's going to output our answer back to the user. A couple other housekeeping things I want to do here. As we're building this PV function, it doesn't really make sense to keep the variables in a different order as what the PV function does, right? It would confuse users if we did that, add unnecessary complexity. So instead, let's go ahead and just match what those PV order is. So let's flip back over to Excel and just remind ourselves the order here. If we go in here, we can actually, let's just go back into function. We can see that rate, number of periods, payment, future value, and then type. All right, so we need to have number of periods be second. That payment is the annuity payment. That's what we're going to add in this fourth version, so we can go ahead and build that into our function. And then the future value is going to be that fourth argument. So let's escape. Let's head back over to VBA and clean up our code that way. So num periods is the second one. I actually already made that change. But now we want to add in our periodic cash flow. So let's do cash flow as double, and then we'll have future value as double. Because of that change, right, the function wouldn't necessarily work if we only use 3 arguments. So let's go put our 4 arguments in just to make sure the function's at least working for us. So we come down, let's type our fourth PV function, tab to do the whole thing. And again, the order here is going to be interest rate, num periods, cash flow, periodic cash flow, and then future value. That way, again, we match to what Excel is doing with their PV function. Now, I do want to highlight that big difference in what's going to be how I'm going to build this function versus how Excel does it. What you've gotten used to with Excel with the PV function is putting in that future value or that cash flow as negative. That way you get a positive answer back out. I'm going to keep everything positive. Doing that negative over and over again tends to annoy me. I kind of know if I want a negative number or a positive number. So in this case, I'm going to make everything stay positive. Otherwise, that's going to be the only real difference between how they build the function and how we're building it here. So let's hit enter. We get a value. It turns out that it's giving us the right value right now, but that's only because we don't have a periodic cash flow yet. As soon as we put in a periodic cash flow, it incorporates into the Excel function, but not into our function yet. So that's going to be our goal for this version, is let's incorporate that annuity calculation as well. So let's flip back over to VBA, and let's add that in. We're going to need some more area for our code here. So we've added our extra spaces in, and so now my strategy in approaching this is going to be to first build some interim variables, right? There are going to be two calculations that happen here. One is that we're taking the periodic cash flows, calculating the value of an annuity and taking that back to time 0. The other is taking that future value and then backing that up to time 0. We then add those two pieces together. So we can do those as naturally two separate calculations and then add them together at the end. All right, so that's going to be our strategy. I'm going to start out by basically calculating dim annuity value as double. And we're going to dim, we'll call it present value, and this is going to be of that future value as double. All right, so I'm going to add a comment here. Initiating new variables for interim calculations. So we're going to do a couple piecewise calculations along the way. Notice we don't have to do this. You could do one really big calculation where you do the present value calculation we've already done, you add the annuity calculation in, and you have a big long formula. That's okay, it'll work. However, it's good practice, both in Excel and in VBA, and programming in general, to break up your calculations as small as possible. It'll be easier for you and other people in the future to really understand what has happened in the steps you've gone through. All right, so now that we've initiated those, let's first calculate the present value. So we set present value equal to, and now what I'd like to do is just copy this piece down here and move that up. Let me show you what happens when I do that. It gives me an expected expression. I haven't finished this line yet, so it's going to say, no, you have to finish this line before you can go grab that. It gives me an error message. So now that it's given me the error message, I know it's a problem. I can copy and paste. All right, so my present value calculation is there. Now, let's do the annuity calculation. So now we can do calculate the annuity value, and we can type annuity value, and this is where we're going to rely on our annuity formula. It's going to be, what is that cash flow? Well, our name of it. So it's cash flow times, and our annuity formula is 1 minus 1 plus the interest rate raised to the negative num periods divided by the interest rate. That's our annuity formula. So now we've done two things. We've calculated the present value, and we've calculated the annuity value. Now, what we can do at the very end is simply add those two values together. We have new variables that are storing those answers. In our output now to the user, we can simply combine present value plus annuity value to give our answer back. So let's check that and see if it's working. We flip back over, come to our fourth function, hit enter. Well, we need to put a cash flow in before we can really test it. Let's put a cash flow of 10 in. And now we see that both functions are updating and we're getting the correct value. So the keys in this function were first to do a little bit of housekeeping, right? We cleaned up our ordering. We made it so we can see all the lines at the same time. And then we added these interim variables. That way we could keep track of calculations along the way and really split up our code a little bit into manageable chunks. Finally, we added them back together to get the annuity value there.